Alrighty then, it is time to do another crossover what if. And since it's October and since I kinda did this one last year, it's time for me to do something similar. Today we're going to talk about what would happen if Nier and Mello were in Danganronpa, similar to how I did with Light and L were in Danganronpa last year. So, we're going to talk about what Nier and Mello would have done had they been around for the killing game, and how I could see the overall story changing. So, buckle up because this is going to be a wild ride, boys and girls. So first, let's kind of create an origin story. So I'm gonna go with the timeline where it's basically a sequel to What If Mello Didn't Die. So in this timeline, Mello is able to help defeat Light Yagami, Light still dies like in canon, and Nier and Mello both survive and eventually start solving crimes together, finally becoming bros. So during this time as bros, they do research and try to solve crimes, and one crime recently catches their interest. Now, these crimes include a lot of missing teenagers, and said missing teenagers are appearing at a game show. Now, this game show is known as Danganronpa. Now, Danganronpa has been continuing since Trigger Happy Havoc back in 2010. As for the main plot of Trigger Happy Havoc slash Danganronpa, it is a series where 16 students are locked up in a school together where they are forced to kill. Whoever kills, then they hold a trial, and if they catch the killer is executed. If they don't catch the killer, then everyone except the killer is executed in the killer's place. So by that point, the series has been running on all the way to the point where it's made it to its 53rd killing game. And by that point, Nier Mello would have been interested to kind of see what this whole thing is about. So they would end up sending their own audition tapes and would later end up joining the cast of V3. Now, they would end up meeting a lot of the cast, and then later we would end up meeting Kaede and Suichi. Yeah, in this timeline, we're going to go with Danganronpa V3. I'll explain in a minute. And like in canon, the whole Danganronpa V3 thing, more or less, that whole meeting thing just goes the same. Now, I picked Danganronpa V3 for a good reason, and that, to be honest, the trials in Danganronpa V3 are definitely far more complex, and the characters near Mello are just dumber versions of Light and L. Like, Light and L are put into the easy game, and in the case of Nier and Mello, they're not as smart, but they are definitely... Excuse me. They're not as smart as Light and L, they're dumber versions of them. Mello being a dumber version of Light, and Nier being a dumber version of L. But however, they're very smart, and I honestly could see them being around the same tier as the V3 cast. Now, we're going to have to talk about Chapter 1 first, but before we do, I do want to let some ground rules out. So before we go to Chapter 1, I will lay out the ground rules. Like with the Light and L video, I will be going with the route that there's 18 characters in this timeline, so more than the average 16. Now in this, I also want to include some other facts, like for example, the fact that Light and L were put in Trigger Happy Havoc, probably the easiest game, but despite that, even though it's the less convoluted of all the trilogy, Light and L were the smartest and definitely show how smart they would be in Trigger Happy Havoc, since those trials are very simple and quick. Now, in this timeline, we're putting Nier and Mello. Now, if we're being realistically honest here, Nier is a dumber version of L, and Mello is a dumber version of Light. Now, these aren't bad things per se, but in a way you could really see that Mello and Light are both very emotional and their logic thinking is they're very logical, but they do let emotions run over them before, so that's their flaws. And L and Nier are very cold and calculated, but I think a big difference is that Nier is still a child, so I would assume that's why L's definitely smarter, because Nier's still a child. And realistically, by this point, I wouldn't say they're the smartest of V3, but they scale near that tier, as V3 is definitely the most convoluted and definitely had the most mystery out from all the games. Now, if you're wondering where I would scale their characters, like their intelligence, I'd probably put Nier on a similar tier to someone like Suichi or Kokichi. Debatably Rantaro, but we never really got to see much of him, so we can't really say where we would scale him on the intelligence listing. Whether Nier is smarter than them or dumber than them, or he's smarter than one but dumber than the other, I'll leave up to you. Now, I would say he's definitely on that tier, just because he's smart, don't get me wrong, but I think the others are just
near that tier as well. They're honestly Danganronpa V3's cast is probably the smartest cast, and Nier and Mello were very intelligent characters, and I definitely think they would scale around that tier. Seeing how Suichi was the ultimate detective, I would say puts him near that tier of Nier. Koichi is around Suichi's intelligence, so that obviously puts them around the same tier as Nier. And Rentaro, we don't really see much of him, but I would assume he could be on that tier, debatable. Mello, on the other hand, is a lot more emotional, so I'd say he's lower than all three of them, four if you want to count Rentaro. And I'd also say that he's probably dumber than Maki, in my opinion. Seeing how Maki is at least more logical, she never really lets emotions take ahead of her. She will get emotional occasionally, but to be fair, she always uses logic to kind of judge everything. She doesn't try to get too emotionally attached. If you wonder where I'd scale Mello, in fact, around a similar tier to someone like Kurumi, Korekyo, Angie, and Mew. So realistically, Mello is pretty intelligent because those four characters are up there as some of the smartest characters during the story. Um, I think they are up there as one of the smartest just because they are shown to be very logical. I just think that Mello's emotions definitely puts him down around that tier. I feel like had he not been as emotional and had he been as cold as Nier, he definitely could have been very high on the list, but, well, it is what it is, so Mello's gonna be a lot lower. But if I'm being honest, Chapter 1 goes the same. Rantaro's still gonna be the victim, and Kaede will still be the killer. I'm sorry, I mean, killer. Nier potentially could die in Rantaro's place, though, in my opinion. Seeing how Nier was always known for investigating stuff, knowing him, he could have definitely gotten himself in the wrong place at the wrong time, which he has gotten himself in those moments where he definitely played Russian roulette with the overall game of Death Note, and definitely risked himself a lot in the story by going against Light. But I honestly do get the vibe that Nier, if he's lucky, could survive this chapter. So he overall, Nier could survive this one. It's debatable. Mello, I honestly think survives. I really don't see him unless he's in the library. But even then, I get the vibe he'd probably be chilling with the others, so he'll just be doing his own thing. So Nier has a good chance of dying if he goes off on his own to investigate. If he doesn't, he's just chilling out and doing his own thing, or if he's with Kaede and Suichi, which, let's be honest, he probably could be, he could survive. Now, Chapter 2, I don't see Nier nor Mello actually falling for the motive. Now, as for why I don't think they'd fall for the motive, it's mainly due to the fact that the Mono Cups really screwed up the motive video thing, and had they probably got their own motive videos, there's a good chance they would survive. If they would kill for the other motives, like if they seen someone else's motives, I don't know. I can't really say for sure. I could see Mello. I don't think Nier would. Mello, on the other hand, maybe. He did show to kind of be a selfless dude, but he was just kind of acting like a jerk, so he kind of he covered himself up like that. He was a very tough love guy. So to be fair, if it's someone like if it's like a screwed up video of someone like maybe like Maki being an assassin, maybe he could kill, but like I don't know. Kurumi's still probably gonna be the black end of this trial. And as for if Ryomu would die, I think there's a good chance she could go after Nier. Before you assume anything, no, I do not hate Nier or anything. It's just realistically, he seems like someone who could die in the early game. For starters, he is very intelligent. He is physically one of the weakest of the cast. I mean, we don't really know if he knows any martial arts. He could, but we never were told about that. But a lot of things about him, his small stature, him being a very intelligent character, him overall being physically weaker than someone like Kurumi, definitely he could be killed here. Mello, I don't see dying in this chapter. I don't think Kurumi would go after Mello unless she poisoned him in advance before the murder. She realistically could find a way to kill Mello. I doubt she'll kill Mello, to be fair. He definitely wouldn't fall for Kurumi. Nier probably wouldn't either, but then again, I feel like if Kurumi can somehow get Nier to trust her, which maybe is possible, if she's able to somehow get him to trust her, or if she just goes out of nowhere and to a point where Nier couldn't predict it, she could kill Nier, and I think it's a possibility. So Nier could die and Ryomu could survive. Now, another change to the overall chapter is the fact that Maki's ultimate could definitely have been revealed a lot faster, assuming we go the route where one of them gets the motive video, or maybe um, Nier he finds out on his own, maybe does his own research, and then he's able to come to the conclusion that Maki is the ultimate assassin by some strain of luck, or maybe he just finds something that places two and two together. And it's possible. Maybe he could reveal it a lot earlier. And if he can reveal it a lot earlier, then there's a good chance that Maki actually could kill him in Chapter 2. I doubt that would be the case. I still think Kurumi's going to be the killer. But it's a possibility that Maki could kill Nier or Mello, or anyone who's able to find out her ultimate a lot quicker, assuming Nier or Mello are somehow able to do that. So I think this chapter would go the same, but there's a good chance someone could die. Probably Nier. I don't see Mello dying. So let's just talk about Chapter 3. Now, I think Angie will still form her cult on Atua, like in the canon. I don't see Mello nor Nier actually joining. Since L is an atheist, I always got the vibe that Nier would obviously be an atheist. Mello just doesn't seem like he would believe in cults or any of that kind of stuff, so he also kind of gives me atheist vibes, while at the same time he probably does believe in a different religion. I'm not a for sure believer that Mello would be an atheist. Nier would. Mello probably has his own belief system. Hard to say for sure. Um, but honestly, Nier Mello, I don't see them joining. Mello's the only one who could, and that's if Angie manipulates his emotions, which is possible. But I just feel like Mello would just kill her if she did. Angie's still gonna die in this chapter. I feel like unless Nier or Mello find a way to somehow prevent it, which I doubt they will, Angie walked in on Correcchio on her own account. It's gonna be hard to prevent that, so that whole thing more or less goes the same, so Angie's gonna die. Tenko would also probably still die, unless you want to go the route where Tenko doesn't die and maybe someone else takes her place, because maybe someone else could just go to the seance in her place, or maybe there'd be different people in the seance. Like, let's say maybe for the sake of the story, there's 6 people. Nier and Mello could somehow join if there's 5 or 6. I feel like it's most likely Nier would join if we're going with 5. If it's 6, then Mello would join. As for who would probably be replaced, Kokichi, to be honest, he really didn't have any reason to be here, and he was just there for the sake of the plot. Korekiyo is the culprit, so he's obviously got to stay there. Suichi's the main character, and he has to be the one to witness everything. Tenko would be the victim, so she's got to die there. And Hibiko's obviously got to be there to watch Tenko die so she could get her character development. But to be honest, Chapter 3 would more or less go the same. I don't think Nier and Mello could solve this trial quickly. Maybe just speed it up. To be honest, I should say this, and I just think Nier and Mello would just speed up the trials. Not a lot, but they would trim up a bit of the meat. There'd probably still be some fat because the joke scenes are probably there, unless Nier and Mello are able to just quickly counter the joke and go back to the main discussion. But to be fair, Mello would probably crack a joke or two on Mew or something. Let's be honest. Um, yeah, I can honestly just hear Mello just call her a whore or something. It would be hilarious. Um, honestly, I just don't really know how the story would kind of go. Like, by this point, Chapter 3 more or less goes the same. And then we get a positive change, because now that means Nier is definitely in the safe zone now, because I feel like Nier's big thing would be the early game. Because if Nier were to die, early game would be the most likely place. Just because of the first 2 killers alone, just because of everything that happened during it, I honestly could see Nier's curiosity or his structure being the main cause of his death, and I think the early game will just show that. If he can make it past the first 2 chapters, I think by chapter 3, 4, 5, and 6, he's mostly safe. So for the most part, I could see Nier actually surviving now, so he's a lot more safe, to be honest. Now, if we're going to talk about chapter 4, I think this is the chapter where Mello could be a culprit or could die. I think similar to really how Nier was, I think that Mello's Mello's thing would be that he would do good in the early game, but by the mid to late game, there is a good chances. There's the chance where he's probably gonna finally ultimately die. So realistically, I guess it's like the Light L video where the people who actually die first end up living the longest in the Danganronpa scenario. So I guess that L and Mello died first in Death Note, but if they're in Danganronpa, they could potentially outlive Light and Nier, something they never got to do. That would have been nice for them, I guess. But realistically, seeing the motive about the outside world, I could see not Nier, but Mello definitely snapping under that pressure. Seeing how he was very emotional based, seeing what the world becomes, could definitely lead him to a point where he's wanting to kill. Now, as for who he would kill, you could say Nier, but I just don't get that vibe from Mello. Nier was definitely the one who would keep him calm. So by that point, either Nier's already gone, assuming that he died by the first two chapters, or he's not around with Mello a lot. So if I don't see Mello killing Nier if Nier's still around near this point. Now as for who he'd likely kill, I get the vibe he would either go for Himiko, mainly due to the fact that she was the weakest there and the most gullible, so it would have been easier for him to kill her, or he'd go for the biggest threat, and that's Kokichi. Now, I know a lot of people may say Nier would be a bigger threat to Mello, but honestly, even if Nier's around, I think Kokichi would still be a bigger threat. I think Nier would realize that Kokichi would definitely find a way to trick him into getting killed, and I think Nier would see Kokichi as a big threat. So I realistically get the vibe that Nier could have definitely went for Kokichi. And besides, even if Mello is able to kill Kokichi, that technically means Gonta and Mew get to actually survive through the game. But then again, there is a good chance that that Gonta would still kill Mew like in the original, so that is a possibility. But however, it is also possible that Mello may actually work with Mew, since if they both view Kokichi as a big enough threat and want to take him out, they may agree to some kind of truce. And when Mew makes the whole alternative universe world video game thing and they trap Kokichi to kill him, it could go out without a success if Mello can actually plot it out a lot better. And I do get the vibe that Mello and Mew combining their intelligence could surpass Kokichi definitely. So they could actually get Kokichi killed, which would lead to one of them probably being executed. And that's a possibility for Chapter 4, that Kokichi could die if Mello actually can get his way by some miracle. Now, if we're going to talk about Chapter 5, I think this would also change debating on what really happens in this timeline. Now, if you go the route where Kokichi does die, assuming Mew or Nier are somehow able to kill him, no one ever gets to decide to escape the outside world or get to see what it's really like, so Shuichi, Himiko, and Maki still kind of get to survive like in the canon with some extra survivors. And plus, we would also have some additional survivors there, such as Kaito and Kibo. And we would also get some more characters like Gonta getting to maybe live, or maybe Rentaro gets to live, or maybe Ryomu gets to live, or maybe um, Mew gets to live, or maybe Nier or Mello are still somehow around for the rest of the stuff. So realistically, Chapter 5 could happen. Maybe instead Mello can play the role Kokichi's originally played if he's the one who actually ends up somehow. If Mew's the one who kills him, Mello could be a good antagonist to replace him, in my honest opinion. And not only that, but I also believe Suichi could reveal Samugi as the mastermind, like in canon, so they'd probably figure that out, and if Nier or Mello are around, that figuring out is going to definitely take a lot faster. But if we go with the original canon and say Kokichi's still alive, Kokichi still kidnaps Kaito, like in the original canon. Kokichi still gets seized. Kaito is revealed to be in the exile and kill him, and then Kaito gets killed like in canon. Everything is more or less the same like the original Chapter 5, to be honest, if you go the route where Kokichi's still alive. Now, let's also talk about the final chapter. Chapter 6, the final trial where the mastermind finally gets revealed. Now, like in canon, Samuki's still going to be revealed as the mastermind, and I feel like the trial could go more or less the same, but Nier and Mello, if both or one of them are still alive, could definitely have helped with the trial and make it a lot faster. They could reveal the mastermind a lot quicker, debatably. I honestly think having those two around could help. Shuichi, Maki, and Himiko are most likely still gonna live like in canon. And as for what else could really happen, there'd probably be more survivors in this timeline. Now, as for who the extra survivors could be, now this is just my opinion at this point. But I would have Nier be the one who gets killed by Kurumi and Ryumu survive. And then have Mello end up dying in Chapter 4, with either Gonta or Mew surviving in his place. I think this would be my version of Danganronpa V3 with Nier and Mello in it, so I could honestly see this fitting very well. Either Mew or Gonta live, and they can do whatever they want. They can be the extra comic relief survivor, and then Ryoma could survive and get his own little character arc where he finally finds meaning to live. But realistically, I think seeing this, Danganronpa V3 as a whole is a lot more different. And plus, some plot points could have definitely been altered had Nier and Mello been there. A lot of characters could have realistically lived, a lot of characters could have realistically died. Anyone, heck, there could have definitely been more than 5 survivors in this timeline. If Nier and Mello are around, they could have definitely played their cards a lot better, and that could definitely lead to them actually getting more survivors to come out of it. And that's if Nier and Mello can play their cards correctly. So I did state there'd probably be like 5 survivors, maybe 4 at most. But it doesn't have to be that way. There could definitely be more characters who live, but that's if Nier and Mello or whoever else is around could just play their cards right. I don't see any of the culprits being prevented, with the exception of Gonta and debatably Kaito. Kaede, Kurumi, and Korekio are still gonna die. I really don't see those deaths being preventable. Gonta's death was preventable if Mello decides to actually stick his nose in the business of Kokichi, Mew, and Gonta. Kaito's is preventable if Kokichi's dead by chapter 4, assuming Mew or Mello or Gonta, one of those three, get Kokichi killed instead. If Mello is smart enough, he could hijack the system to get Kokichi strangled by Gonta or something like that. He could find a unique. There could be something unique. I could see Kokichi potentially dying in the 4th chapter if Mello can plan it outright. If he doesn't, then probably dies in chapter 4. Mello does or something. I don't really know. But I'm honestly going to be honest. Nier would probably die in the early game. Mello would die in mid or late game. I just like they're good characters. Don't get me wrong. It's just I think Mello just has a lot of weaknesses to show against his survival. It's the fact that he's physically weak, he's extremely small, he's very intelligent. Those are 3 things that they would honestly just go after. Kokichi at least had fighting experience, where Nier doesn't really probably have any, but we don't really know. I doubt he has really fighting experience. He could probably be Himiko in a fight, but that's really it. And then Mello's biggest flaw is the fact that he's a hothead. So realistically, Mello could definitely fall under emotions. And if Mello's emotions are triggered enough, he definitely could kill someone. I don't see him being a victim personally, unless it's like Kokichi or unless it's like in the place of Mew or something. Then by all means, Gonta could potentially kill him if Kokichi gets his way. Mello is just like I just don't see him being a culprit. He would be I don't see him being a victim. I mean, a culprit just seems like the most likely, just because he's very hot-headed, so he could definitely get himself killed because of something he did. A slip up on his behalf could definitely cause him to become a victim, though. But I honestly could see it being a higher chance of him being a culprit, though. So, what did you guys think of the video? Did you enjoy this another Death Note Danganronpa kind of what if crossover? I was thinking about doing L vs. Kira, but because I recently got a new job, it's gonna be hard to edit, so unfortunately I'm scrapping that video for a while. I'll probably not do it next year, probably like sometime in January, February. That could be a good date to do the video. Um, I could probably just do I'll probably just do I'll probably do a JoJo video next week, okay? Uh, I'll probably I don't know, I'll think of it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.